Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in.
This time we're going to delve into the topic of AI, and I'm really excited to be joined by Emily from Lenovo. Emily, will you introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm Emily Barrett, and I work for Lenovo's Infrastructure Solutions Group. So that's everything Lenovo does, apart from the bits of Lenovo that you will know very well, which is our laptops, tablets, and also mobile phones as well. So I do everything other than that. And my role specifically is as a solutions architect in that part of our business. And I have a specialty and responsibility for our AI business in the UK.
Excellent. Thanks, Emily. So in this series, we're going to break it down into 3 parts. We're going to talk a little bit about how do projects get off the ground, what sort of personas are buying AI and consuming AI, and what are their needs, because they're very different. Second part, we're going to address the topic of failure. Why do sort of 50 or 60% of projects not make it out of POC phase? And then in the last section, I think it'll be the interesting one. We're going to delve into some real world use cases where this technology has been deployed and have a look at, what was deployed, how was it deployed, and what were some of the lessons learned from that. So with that, let's get into part 1. I mean, the topic of AI is just, all over everything at the moment, and we have got to be very careful it doesn't become the only conversation from that side of it. We'll get a little bit later on to, where does Gen AI fit into that, because that is the thing that's reignited the conversation over the last 2 years or so. But how do you see that difference between, the AI we've been doing for the last 10 years and the AI that only seems to be the conversation in the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, so I've been working in AI for over 10 years now. And I think people are always a little bit shocked when I say that, because they're like, oh, but AI only happened when ChatGPT started. You're like, no. There's so much more out there when we talk about AI. But I think what generative AI and ChatGPT has done is really bring that out into the open in a consumable way that literally everybody can interact with. And that's partly what's caused this explosion at the moment. But actually, when you start looking at enterprise use cases, yes, generative AI has its place, but on a personal level, I find the other use cases much more interesting. And actually, when you're looking at things that you can get a good ROI in terms of business, because let's face it, the majority of us are not charities. We need to see an ROI on everything we do. You can actually see that more when you start looking at the predictive sides of AI, because effectively all AI is statistics on rocket fuel, right? And what it enables you to do is to more effectively analyze data and therefore predict what might be happening in the future based off the data you have. So whether that is generative AI predicting what kind of content you might want to create, because when we talk about generative AI, we are talking about content creation, whether that's, creating text, creating a PowerPoint, creating images, creating podcasts. Is this real or are we deep fakes? Who knows? Yeah. Or whether you are talking about looking at supply data, if you are selling something onto other people and being able to predict what supply you need to have available, that's one area where we can look at things. And then the other area is computer vision, which again has been quite widely talked about because it's easy for people to visualize and get their heads around. Because when we talk about computer vision, we are literally just talking about using a computer to watch a screen to pick up anything that a human might be able to pick up. So if you're in a security environment where you have somebody sat watching multiple screens, well, actually now we can help put a computer system in there. Yeah. Exactly. To actually go bling, 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 bling. Look over here, something's happening. Because especially in those kinds of environments, if someone's been doing that for hours on end,
attention spans and
exactly, you get
it's a great augmentation. So we've got our predictive AI models, which are really looking at historical data and predicting patterns.
Yeah.
And then we've got our generative AI that's creating new content, potentially from that same data, or even creating new content that can be used to create additional predictions, etc.
Yeah.
Regardless of the use case, whether it's predictive or generative, what are you seeing as far as the sorts of personas within organizations? Because I think it's very different types of people that are engaging in these projects. So I think we've got 4 categories that we can talk to people about. But what are you seeing as the first one of them categories of people adopting AI?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, the first category of people that I see adopting AI are people who are DIYing it, right? People who are building their own algorithms, people who are building their own models, they're training things. And typically these are people within research organizations or within a scientific community or who work for consultancies. So you're talking about people who actually are hands-on hard coding and doing that training. And when we're talking, those kinds of people tend to know what it is they want, and they tend to be looking at buying some form of hardware platform with a nice bit of software wraparound to make that hardware usable for them to actually do the programming, the modeling that they want to be able to do, right?
So these are the guys buying the GPU farms, building the HPC clusters,
Exactly,
generating all them petabytes worth of storage, etc. But
yeah,
do we find that a lot of them, though, they're not particularly infrastructure related people as well? So actually, they don't care about CPUs or network or IOPS. They just want to consume an outcome because they're generally data scientists or data analysts or something like that. So they're not infrastructure people.
Yeah, and ultimately they want to be able to run whatever it is they are doing faster, or they want to be able to produce a certain amount of stuff. They want to be able to train a model with a set number of parameters, right? And generally that's what they know. And so it's reframing and being able to take what they're doing and doing that translation piece into, right, okay, to be able to achieve your goal, this is what you need, right? And I think that's where infrastructure specialists can really help here.
Provide that abstraction with software as well. So
Exactly.
You've got a data scientist or a programmer that's interfacing with a software layer, and that can then translate down to the hardware, job scheduling.
Precisely, because there's this whole layer of stuff that I was going to say is there, should be there, but you don't want to have to think about it as a user, right? No. You just want it to work.
Yeah, but we got the other angle as well. You've got all of your data center / infrastructure specialists that probably are also just as terrified about that data science world the other way, and they don't want to be they don't want to be bothered, not bothered is wrong, but they don't want to be worried about the upstream as much as the data scientists are worried about the downstream. So it's finding that piece in the middle. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. So there are technical people.
Yeah, these are our techies, these are our data scientists.
What are our next group of people then? As the next layer up, as it were.
So the next layer up is people who are looking at cognitive platforms. And this is generally people who are looking to bring in a generic capability. So say I want to create a chatbot. Everybody knows what a chatbot is. It's an easy example. You want to create a chatbot for your organization. But you don't want to build it yourself. But you do want to tailor what that chatbot is doing to be specific to your use case.
So you're still bringing your enterprise data
exactly
to a pre-trained model, and then leveraging one of the new, whether it's fine-tuning or RAG or whatever, to provide that more contextual answer. Yeah,
precisely. So there are various well-known platforms out there that provide this, so things like IBM Watson, and we get people who are looking at purchasing that kind of capability in and then training on their own data. So that's typically what we see in terms of like cognitive platforms. That, as we say, tends to be the next layer up from your data scientists.
Well, so quite a generic outcome at that point. So I think then we go into something a bit more specific.
Yeah, exactly. So getting again more specific, we start to look at use case solutions. So this is typically where people go, I have this particular industry problem. So whether that is I want to increase the quality of products coming off my manufacturing line, or it's I want to reduce the number of people mis-scanning items in my retail environment. Particularly a problem at self-checkout at the moment.
Yeah. Very diplomatic way of placing that.
Yes.
Mis-scanning. I like
yes.
it.
Yeah, it's all the diplomatic ways of being able to say, to stop people nicking stuff.
Yes.
Right? Because ultimately, let's face it, we don't want people nicking stuff from retail environments. Or whether that is a public space where someone wants to do security monitoring, or even a private space. So whether you're looking at how people access your office buildings. So people who come with a specific problem, we look at then a use case solution for them. So this tends to be looking at a particular ISV capability, and that software package will be specific for that use case.
Yeah.
There tends to be, and there is always an element of a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of training, because everybody's data is slightly different.
But it's generally a bit more off the shelf than the other use cases that exist because the outcome is so much more defined.
Exactly, right? And you're shooting for that defined outcome. So then the next layer up that we might look at is what we call a consultative engagement, right? And this is the, hello, I'd like to buy an AI, please.
Yes. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, we don't really know.
Yeah, my shareholders say, or the analysts say, we need to be looking at AI. And actually, people sometimes laugh when I say this, but for a lot of businesses, they don't know where they should be starting. And that's okay. It's okay to not know where you should be starting in this world. That is absolutely fine. But this would need like a bit more of a consultative approach in terms of looking at what you've already got. What are your business goals? What is it you actually want to drive with AI? Because at the end of the day, AI is a tool, right? Like the majority of technologies.
And we talk about the same thing here, is about how do we identify what we call the golden use cases.
Yeah.
The ones that are actually going to return an ROI, the ones that can get the projects off the ground, that can keep the board happy, the investors happy, so that you can then get onto the more interesting, potentially, or the more less defined use cases because you've got success.
Exactly.
Under your belt, the platform's there, the ROI is being shown. So yeah, there's a lot of that. Where do we start? Or we've identified 300 use cases. What do we do? And like,
yes,
I'll do them all.
How do we choose a use case? Yeah, and that happens so often because AI is such a broad thing, and it can be used in so many different areas. Picking what you do first is really important. And yeah, there's a lot of advice and expertise out there that you can access to get help with that, right?
One of the other challenges we see is that it tends to get put on IT as a technical outcome. Please define our AI strategy, write our governance policy, define our use cases. But actually, they're generally more business problems, not an IT problem. IT can facilitate from a platform perspective, whether that's on-prem or cloud or wherever it happens to be. But the problem is generally a line of business problem.
Yeah.
So actually, what we need to do is talking to them line of business owners within the group, getting them in a room, whiteboarding, workshopping with them so they can see the art of the possible, so they can start going, actually, this is the problem in my area, and can AI help me fix that to drive efficiencies? And a lot of it is about back-end efficiencies a lot of the times, more than necessarily customer-facing chatbots and stuff, which are a thing that gets all the press attention. But the ROI, I think, comes from document intelligence, back-end process automation, stuff that customers don't actually see.
Yeah.
But helps the bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100% agree with that.
Cool. So that gives us 4 core use cases. Very different personas, though, when we're looking about that. Who's buying? What are they buying? What do they care about? Which means we've got to be very cognitive of them requirements. Otherwise, we're speaking the wrong language.
Yeah, and I think this is, from a solution provider perspective, it does pose a bit of a challenge because there are 4 different languages that you have to be able to speak in, right? And if you're not speaking in the right language to each of those users, you're going to lose them. Yeah. And occasionally you'll be in the situation where you've got all 4 users in one room and you've got to speak 4 different languages. And so there is a little bit of a need for being able to do that translation.
I guess just to close out this section a little bit is, what are you seeing as the big conversations at the moment, though, as well? What are the trends? What are the things that maybe aren't as obvious as people think? Because obviously it's all a Gen AI conversation. But we touched on earlier, actually, it's not the answer to everything. But what are the other big things you're seeing?
So, I mean, people are coming to us generally to talk about generative AI. People want to they want to do a chatbot, or they want to have something that will summarize their Word documents, or they want something that will produce a PowerPoint presentation for them. And those are really valid use cases, and they do really help with increasing, well, they may help with increasing productivity in the workplace. I think that's still yet to be seen as to whether they do, because humans are excellent at procrastinating. I say that obviously on a personal level. I'm not going to comment for anybody else, but humans do tend to find a way to procrastinate. But the big thing we're actually seeing a lot of take up on is computer vision, right? And this has been an overriding trend for a little while now, is we're seeing more and more people look at these computer vision use cases. Everybody will have noticed. If you haven't already noticed, you will notice when you next step outside the number of cameras that have sprung up everywhere, right? It is becoming a case of there are cameras everywhere, and these cameras are picking up a lot of data, and it is impossible for a human to sit and watch all of this data all the time. And, it's just, there's too much. Right. So actually working out how you monitor that and what value you can derive from
How do you actually monetize that? It's the important piece, isn't it? And
yeah.
And the problem with this, though, is lots of cameras, lots of other data sources equals lots of data, which equals lots of storage. Then we want to analyze that, which requires lots of compute. And for the last few years, there's been this big, sustainability drive within the IT industry. Let's reduce carbon footprint, reduce power consumption, which obviously has a big commercial benefit to organizations as well. And now we're saying, actually, can you, quadruple your storage, and can you put a lot of, 10 kilowatt servers into a data center somewhere? I mean, that's got to be a challenge from a sustainability angle.
It is. It absolutely is a challenge from a sustainability angle. And it's a challenge from a sustainability angle for businesses, but also on a personal level as well. So I was chatting to one of my siblings. I have a lot of siblings. But was chatting to one of them about their usage of ChatGPT. And they were using ChatGPT the same way that you might use Google to query everything. But actually, when you start looking at the carbon emissions associated with querying something from ChatGPT versus the carbon emissions of querying something in Google or another search engine, the ChatGPT carbon emissions are way bigger, because effectively every time you're doing that, you are running this neural network. It consumes a lot of power versus doing just a standard search engine search. The two things are technically quite different, and there isn't an understanding of that within the general public. So I think there's a challenge there, right, on a general public perspective, but also from a business perspective as well. Everybody has net zero targets now, and the idea that we might be able to get IT to carbon neutral and carbon negative even is a challenging one. And certainly when we're talking about increased data, increased processing of that data, sustainability is something that businesses really need to be thinking about. And there are certain technology tricks that we can do to help reduce the power consumption, especially on the compute and storage side of things. But what you really need to be speaking to is somebody who has expertise in doing this. So little Lenovo pitch here, sorry. Yeah. It was inevitable. But, we've been looking at some of these cooling technologies for well over 10 years now. And actually, when we start looking at the way you might do something using a technology like direct water cooling versus a traditional air-cooled system, you're looking at like up to 30% power reduction. And
make a big difference.
It's a massive difference. So it starts to reduce the scale of that challenge. And I think what we're going to start to see is more enterprises start to think about how they are creating their compute farms and what they can do to still produce that same amount of compute, right? Because you don't want to sacrifice your productivity. You still want to be able to crunch through all that data.
It's always going to be that balance between sustainability and innovation at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And which one wins out. But it's going to be a difficult challenge.
So it's if you can do that, but reduce the carbon footprint associated with the usage of that, then, everybody's happy. So that's kind of what we're looking at doing. And one of the ways that we're working with a lot of our clients at the moment is looking at that sustainability picture. And I think AI is increasing the urgency with which people are starting to look at that and think about it.
Thanks for listening. I've been Rob Sims, Chief Technologist for CDW.
And I've been Emily Barrett from Lenovo.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Be sure to check out the back catalogue for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.